Hello, my name is Dr. Tom Bennett. I'm from Kane University, and today I'm with Mr. Chris Latham, my intern from the university, and we're aboard the Battleship New Jersey, harbored in Camden, New Jersey. Today is June 29th, the year 2007, and I'm interviewing today Mr. Bob Crippen of, is it Cedar Falls, Iowa? Cedar Falls, Iowa, who served aboard the Battleship New Jersey during 1968 to 1969, and he served as a gunner's mate on the 5-inch guns port side. Bob, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Let's start off the conversation. I always ask, how'd you get to be involved with the Battleship New Jersey?
In 1967, when the Jersey was first put in commission, I was in Da Nang, Vietnam, a place called China Beach, and I was a tower security guard. Completely, my full-time job was 6 hours on and 12 hours off, 30 feet off the ground, around the perimeter of our base. I used to go to China Beach, and the New Jersey would shoot right over the beach, 20 miles away, and do their job. And I thought it'd be nice to be on that ship. The next time I got orders, it was for the New Jersey.
Had you put in specifically for the New Jersey? Just lucked out.
Lucked out.
Now, tell me, how'd you get into the Navy, and then how did you end up doing guard duty on shore versus aboard a ship somewhere?
My first duty station was in Texas, and I got my papers, and I would be sent to the Naval Support Activity in Da Nang. And before we went to Da Nang, we went through some security training. I went to Camp Pendleton for 3 weeks for weapons training, and went to Coronado for maybe 2 weeks training, and then went to Da Nang and started security 3 days later.
And what month of the year was that, please?
I think I went to Vietnam maybe September of early 67.
And what made you join the Navy?
I was drafted into the Army. Then they didn't have enough time, and they gave me 9 days before I should report. In those days, you could get a deferment and then join the military that you wanted to. So I joined the Navy.
What made you go Navy versus Army, Marines, Air Force?
My cousin is a senior chief, hospital corpsman, and he started E1 and worked all his way up. And I just wanted to be in the Navy after seeing what he had done.
Talk to us, by the way, once you're in Da Nang, if you can try and paint a picture in our minds, what was Da Nang like? What did you see at Da Nang, China Beach, and generally in Vietnam?
The buildup of military in Da Nang was enormous. The naval base in Da Nang sent fighter planes right to the DMZ right now. We're real close to the DMZ. And the place was really flat, and I remember how they had no electric and no running water or nothing. And it was really unusual. I'd never been anywhere in my life, so it was very interesting.
And your job would be 6 hours on, 12 hours off.
Right.
Up in a 30-foot guard tower.
Right.
Tell us about your experiences up there. What is it like?
Trying to stay awake at night. And homesick. And I think every GI had that. And I was glad to get back.
Did you ever have any attempted or actual enemy infiltration into your position?
No, but we had rockets and mortars come in quite a bit.
Talk to us about the rockets and mortars. What's it like to be in a rocket or mortar attack?
You wonder which one's going to hit you, if you know what I mean. But nobody ever infiltrated into our camp at all. But we took artillery rounds and rocket rounds, just like the Naval Air Base there in Da Nang. They were always getting rocketed at least 2 or 3 times a week. And then we'd get them every once in a while, too.
Before we get on to the actual battleship, what was the morale of the men who were stationed in Da Nang? How did they feel about the war, about being there, about the military?
Well, if they were like me, most of them were drafted. So their attitudes weren't very good, as far as I'm concerned. Everybody wanted to get the heck away from those people and home. And that's basically what I have said to you is probably what they thought too.
Did you ever get a chance to go out into Da Nang, any parts of Da Nang, get off base?
Yeah, we used to go to the top of the mountain behind us was an Air Force base. And it was really rugged terrain, so about once a month, different companies would go up and just check everything out because it was a security area. There was a missile base on top of what is Monkey Mountain in Da Nang.
And what was that? Ground-to-air missile base?
Right.
In case of attack
Air
by
Force.
North Vietnamese and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, before we get on to the battleship, anything else you want to say about your experiences in Da Nang?
I don't know. If I would have been out in the bush and seen people murdered, I don't know if I'd be like I am today.
Okay. Let's now have you transfer from shore duty to sea duty. Talk to us about that. How does that occur? What happens when you get aboard the ship?
I just was given orders to come to the ship, and I had heard that everyone there was a whiz, perfectly selected, out of, I just thought, well, if they think that I'm a good person, and they've selected a good person, I was told that only so many people are going to get on the ship because they're really going to pick apart and get the best people. So.
And by the way, I've heard that before too. That when they selected the crew for the battleship in Vietnam tour, they were very selective as to who they put on the ship because there was only one battleship on duty. By the way, Chris Latham, if you have any questions I don't ask, just jump in. Just wave your hand at me, and Chris will ask a question too because he's becoming a historian in the future. So you get on the ship, and tell us where you're berthed and what your jobs are aboard the ship.
I flew to Japan in late 67, early 68, and picked up the New Jersey and had to work in the mess decks for a month because I didn't have a job. And then about a month or 6 weeks after I got here, then I was put in 5-inch guns. And then stayed with the 5-inch guns till I left.
You never trained on 5-inch guns or had any experience?
No experience whatsoever on it.
On-the-job training then?
Yeah.
And talk to me about what your duties were in the gun, how you were trained for those duties.
I worked in the area with the elevators for bringing the projectiles up. And usually the fuses are set automatically with computers. But also you can set the fuse and the timers with a wrench. And the cone of the projectile has a numbered sequence of 0 through 45 seconds. And I timed the fuses when it needed to be, and 95% of the time, the computer timed the shell to explode.
So you're saying then you could either time the fuse by hand or by computer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it was done by hand, so they would say adjust the shell to fire in 30 seconds, like that, shoot in 30 seconds. If it's done by computer, how does a computer set the shell to be fired in 30 seconds?
I think there's a circular mechanism that grabs a hold of the top of the fuse, and on each side of the fuse are two little extensions of the cylindrical part. So when this thing comes down, it grabs a hold of these two ears that stick out and spin it where it belongs from 0 to 45.
And where's that done? Before it goes up the elevator, or done in the gun?
It's right below the mount itself. Underneath the mount is where the elevator comes up from the magazines.
So what percentage of the shells would you say were still set manually versus by computer?
Not very many. Hardly any at all.
And when would they set them manually versus by computer?
If the computer gives out, someone can go ahead and do it.
Now, talk to us about the number of fire missions that your guns had and so on like that, and where you're firing at.
Most of the time we were firing at bunkers. And there was one case in a ship we fired 1,500 rounds to save a Marine troop from being overrun. 1,500 rounds in one night.
One night. Was that up near the DMZ?
Yes.
Guess who that was? Oliver North. He was the person up there.
Are you
No-
joking with
no, I'm
me?
not joking. When I interviewed Oliver North, and I have his tape, what happened is he was a platoon leader, first lieutenant, a small platoon down to 25, 26 guys. They're using some Army armored personnel carriers. They're moving out of the coastal area up in the northern area by the DMZ. Somehow, they don't know, they got into either a battalion or North Vietnamese regimental headquarters area. They were attacked. The armored personnel carriers were knocked out pretty quickly. He had a tanker with him that would be hit. He himself is going to be wounded several times. They're surrounded. He put in a call for fire, request for fire. Who comes up? But the Battleship New Jersey says, we can help you. And they shot all night with 5-inch guns. And then at the end, they added 16-inch guns during the night also. And he said, if not, around, way worse in Vietnam, around 3 or 4 o'clock is when the enemy will close in. If they're going to nail you, knock you off. And he said they didn't, and they're all waiting for the attack. Most of the guys were killed or wounded in his platoon. And he said in the morning, the whole place is surrounded by gigantic shell holes. And 16-inch guns make big shell holes, 30, 40, 50, 60 feet in diameter. And Oliver North, aboard ship, maybe 2 years ago it was, told me that, and I have that on tape. And he says it was the Battleship New Jersey saved him. He wouldn't be alive today. So you did some good.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting? So when you see North on TV, or if you ever get to meet him or call him or something like that, and show, hey, I was aboard the ship when we fired, he'd be very happy. And he profusely thanked any veterans of the ship who helped save him that day. Good. So do you recall, that was, I guess, a very different night when you're firing that many rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall what was going on? Was there confusion, excitement, or tiredness?
They were really tired the next morning. I wasn't doing any of the shooting that night because we had 10 on mounts. We had 5 on each side then. It all depended who was on duty at the time.
So did you hear the guns going off
Oh yeah.
repeatedly?
Oh yeah.
And when you're aboard ship, and I know quite often if you're working below decks, you don't exactly know what's happening when you're 18, 20 years old. Did you sense that there was some big event taking place, or is it just another night of shooting?
Oh yeah, that was very unusual. We had never, ever, and never will probably do that many rounds in one night.
So that was probably Oliver North if you're shooting just south of the DMZ. Any other things you remember about firing? Did you go north of the DMZ, North Vietnam? Any other targets?
All the beaches looked the same, I was on a ship when we fired 9 guns. 9-gun salvo.
What is that like?
It moved the ship about 10 foot.
So they're firing off one side towards land, and it just moved the ship back about 10 feet. Obviously, when the ship is firing at 16-inch guns, nobody can be on deck because of the concussion. Did you feel the blast inside the ship also?
We were up there when they fired.
You're on deck.
Sure.
I thought you're supposed to be off deck. When you're
I have a million pictures of the guns going. I don't have a million pictures. I have maybe 100 slides of the guns going off.
Interesting. So what's it like when a 16-inch gun fires?
Just a huge kaboom.
And you said you're on China Beach when the shells went over. What's it like to hear or feel a shell going over?
Kind of like a but I hear where it hit, the Marines said it sounded like a freight train coming in.
Yeah, as the shell's coming down, it sounds
right.
Sounds, you're right in. It seems like you're tied to a track and the train's coming right at you sometimes. Talk to me a little bit about the crew, the morale of the crew, how they work together, etc. When you were aboard the ship.
Everybody was happy to be aboard this ship. If there was people who didn't like it, they weren't friends of mine or I didn't know them. We got treated real good when we pulled into port.
So on the ship, then the morale was high, you would say?
Oh yeah.
Did
sure.
people work together well?
Yeah.
Interesting. So comparing that to your experiences on land in Da Nang.
Complete opposite.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe the people on land thought that the country had given up on them to put them in that predicament.
You mean the United States had?
Maybe, yeah. And on the ship, we didn't have to worry about being attacked or anything like that.
So the safer condition on the ship probably increased morale a bit. Food on the ship was better?
Yeah.
How was the food? Talk to me about that.
In Vietnam?
No, in both Vietnam and the ship.
The food on the ship was real good, and Vietnam wasn't too bad for the situation.
How about Captain Snyder? He was captain during the time of the ship in Vietnam. Talk to me about Captain Snyder.
He and his Marine Guard would come around an awful lot and talk to us all. One day a month, he would sit down and eat with the people who had a birthday that month on a Sunday. And he wasn't able to go with us up to Birmingham to decommission it. And he wanted to.
Yeah. How did the crew like Captain Snyder?
I think they liked him.
Why?
Maybe he was on a ship that no other captain was going to be able to be on either. So evidently he wanted to be here and he wanted to take care of his people.
Sometimes officers have good and bad reputations, as you know, from being in the military. Was his reputation good, bad, middle?
I'd say it was okay.
So what you're then telling me, if I'm correct, is that while you're aboard the ship, morale is high, people wanted to be here, yet compared to people on land, it's very, very different. People appreciated their officer. Did you feel the same way in Da Nang towards your officers there?
Well, they were Navy, and I don't think they operated the same way that an Army officer would act, or a Marine officer. I kind of thought that the people in Da Nang were kind of gung ho, if you know what I mean. Just
Gung ho meaning what they want to do to the.
They thought they could be as good as the Army and the Marines when it comes time to defending themselves, if you know what I mean.
They wanted to be more Marine than the Marines were.
Yeah.
And did that get on your nerves?
Yeah, a little bit.
Now compare those officers to the other officers you ran into on the ship. How are the officers on the ship different?
Maybe they were naval officers that should be on a ship instead of being on land and associating with the Army and the Navy.
That's interesting. You raise a very good point that Navy officers who serve on land duty somewhere, especially in a combat situation, are really not trained for that. They're trained to be ship officers, which is a very different experience. Not that one's better than the other, but it's very different. By the way, would you like any water as we're...
Sure.
Grab a water, sure. Just pop it open. That's a real different experience to be on land. Working? Is it working?
It's supposed to come up, yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Is it working?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Take as much as you want, and everything.
I'm fine.
But you raise it. The reason I'm questioning you on this is nobody's ever mentioned that before, and you're one of only two people I interviewed from the Battleship New Jersey who served on land and who was also on the ship. And you're saying similar things to what that other person said, that what they saw on shore in Vietnam, and this person went further out than you did into the countryside, had a much different impact on him than your ship experience did. Are we on to something here? Am I correct about that?
Yeah.
Explain.
Da Nang is right on the coast and the ocean, and protected pretty well because they can't come in from the ocean side. And 7-10 miles out of Da Nang, it was really rough. That's what I hear. It's hard to believe that 5 miles away people can be butchered, but yet where we are, it wasn't quite as bad.
And on the ship, however, you felt
safe.
Safe. It was partly air conditioned at the time too. Was there some air conditioning?
Yeah, I think there was some air conditioning in the late '60s.
Sure. Plus, you have a bunk to sleep in every night. It may not be the coolest place, but it's safe. Nobody shoots at you. No hand grenades being flipped over the wire. No
Yeah.
rockets or mortars coming in on you. By the way, was the ship ever fired at while you were on aboard it? Because I've heard it was fired at by one land base on some little island, and then Captain Snyder said, "Blow away the island." At first, there was an officer on duty, and the ship took some rounds. I don't know if it hit the ship or not, but it landed nearby, splashed in the water.
Really?
And the officer of the day, who was up on the bridge, started turning the ship and taking it out to sea. And the story I've gotten is that Captain Snyder came up and said, "What are you doing?" The man said, "Oh, we're being shot at." Captain Snyder said, "This battleship doesn't run from anybody." Turned around and let's shoot back. And he sank. He just blew the island apart with the 16-inch guns because somebody was firing with little heavy-duty mortars or something like that at a battleship, and he just blew the island apart and it sank. One thing I ask about too is on the ship, something I've explored is race relations. White and blacks were having civil rights problems back home. What was the relations between white and black sailors on the ship at the time?
It wasn't really that bad, I don't think.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Did you notice anything ashore? Was it different ashore at all?
No. It may have been, but I didn't see a lot of problems between the blacks and whites.
How about now? You've gone through your tour in Vietnam aboard the ship, and the ship is coming home. When did you find out that the ship would be decommissioned?
About 5 days before we were to go back to Vietnam again. So I'm not real sure what date that would be.
What was the attitude of the crew when they heard the ship's going to be put away into storage?
Surprising, and that's. Yeah. But there was the New Jersey wasn't the only one put into mothballs. I think at that time there was 50 or 75 ships along with us.
That were starting to be put away.
Right.
And why were they putting all these ships away? Money saving, or cutting back on the war, something like that. So you get back to Bremerton, is that correct? And the ship is decommissioned. And then what happens to you? You're decommissioned also at that point?
I was separated. My time was up. There was a reduction in troop strength in '69. And I was out 3 months before I was to get out. So I separated from the ship here. And then when I walked off the ship, I was out of the Navy.
How did it feel?
Great. Because if I would have went somewhere else to be separated, it takes a week or two, I hear.
Now, once you're out of the Navy, what do you do next? You go back to Iowa, or?
Yeah. I went back and got married and had 3 daughters.
Oh, good for you. Very
yeah.
Good. Guess one other question I have is, I always ask people, how did your experiences on the ship impact your life? What do you carry with you today about it?
It was the only ship I ever had, and I know it's the best ship in the Navy. Pretty much.
And this is your first time back on the ship, I understand. What was your reaction and feeling when you came aboard again?
Amazing. We didn't have the Harpoon missiles and the close-in combat systems or none of that, so it was really interesting. It's hard to believe I gave tours on this thing, but I couldn't now.
Because it's changed around.
Oh yeah, it's really changed.
Now, you mentioned you have, 3 daughters?
Mm-hmm.
And some grandchildren probably out there?
2 grandchildren.
Yeah. Do they ever ask about your experiences in the Navy or aboard the Battleship New Jersey?
I took a lot of pictures and slides, and when they were little, they got indoctrinated with the battleship and everything. And my son-in-law just got back from Iraq 2 years ago, and he was in the Army. So they're Army people, pretty much.
Right.
So
they've gone to the dark side, so to speak. Right?
Yeah, the Navy is kind of it's like the Army-Navy game in football throughout the year in our house. You know what I mean?
Little competition, friendly competitions.
Really.
Chris, is there any questions you might have at this point?
The only question I have is, back up to your time in Vietnam, what kind of connection was there with home, either on land or while you were on the ship?
A lot of mail. My mom bought a tape player and would make tapes, reel to reel in those days, and then send me the reel, and I had tape player and play them back. And it was there was no calling back every 2-3 days like Iraq now.
Right. Right.
It's a different war.
No cell phones, no.
Nothing.
Did you ever have a chance to talk to your folks by radio or radio relay or anything like that?
Shortwave over Christmas time once. Shortwave people did that, and then they'd pick up the message and then get on the phone and say, "Hey, your son called from Vietnam," and I intercepted or have it come over my equipment. No, I never talked to my mom and dad the whole time I was in Vietnam.
It was too hard to make the communications.
Yeah, there's no way. You just couldn't call home.
And today people have email in Iraq and
Yeah.
telephones galore. They can. It's almost like having a job in the next city or something. That's very, very different today. Is there anything I haven't asked that you'd like to tell us about that you think is important that for the historical record, because we're interested in history here, that you'd like to leave with whoever listens to this tape 50 years from now?
Well, I'm from Iowa, and the Iowa had a terrible accident and killed a lot of people. And they have my sympathy if their parents are still alive or their children or whatever.
You
That's
know,
about it.
one man aboard the ship, Marty Waltmeyer, was one of the investigators of the Iowa disaster. He's still aboard the ship, and there's a lot of supposition what happened. It's what happened, and Marty said that it might have had something to do with the gunpowder and ammonia gas coming out of it, causing a spark somewhere down below that caused it to blow. I've heard also that that day when they were firing the gun, the regular gun crew was off onshore doing training, and the man they had as a rammer was, even though he's qualified to do it, he hadn't been serving as a rammer. He might have rammed it too hard, which might have caused the impact and an explosion. So that's a very sad incident. Did the people back in Iowa feel that? Did they? They really did, yeah. Sure, and as a battleship sailor, you could understand that too.
Yeah.
What happens when a 16-inch gun turret blows up? Definitely.
Yeah.